Buen día y bienvenidos al webinar de la Comunidad de Práctica para el apoyo de los planes nacionales de adaptación al cambio climático en América Latina y el Caribe. Me gustaría preguntar si me pueden escuchar bien. Mi nombre es Lili Lieva y voy a moderar el webinar del día de hoy. Primero me gustaría darle algunas indicaciones cómo utilizar la plataforma VoiceBoxer. Para aquellos de ustedes que no han utilizado la plataforma VoiceBoxer, pueden elegir el idioma a escuchar en el botón inferior.
That's how you can choose whether English or Spanish to listen to English or to Spanish. If you have any technical problem, please do click on the question mark located on the bottom left hand of your screen. We have our colleagues there that can help you with any issues you may have. If your screen freezes or the audio cuts, you can just refresh your browser. Also, if you cannot see well the slides, you can minimize the screen so that you can see correctly the slides in a full format. I just wanted to present the Community of Practice, PENAC. It's an initiative of UN Environment through Regatta Project, the Regional Gateway for Technology Transfer and Climate Change Action for Latin America and the Caribbean. This is being implemented along with practical action. This community offers the people the elaboration of plans of adaptation plans for the Latin American countries and the Caribbean countries, the opportunity to support each other through the exchange of good practices, and also to receive contributions from researchers and specialists from the civil society and other specialists. This exchange is done through a portal of knowledge where we carry out discussions and also a series of webinars such as the one you're in today. And those are open for specialists for adaptation of climate change that they are not necessarily part of the community of practice, but that is how we look to find ways to exchange experiences among each other. Today's webinar addresses the issue of elaboration of assessment of options for adaptation measures, methods and experiences of selection and prioritization in Paraguay and Uruguay. So in today's webinar, this is the second webinar of a series of webinars that we are organizing. Today's webinar will talk about the experiences regarding methodologies of prioritization of projects, cost-effective, cost-benefit, and other methodologies, cost-benefit analysis, applying political policies of climate change, and main challenges. We will also have a case study of the cost-benefit analysis of the treatment system for residual waters in Paraguay. We also have a presentation regarding valorization and prioritization and creation of policy of climate change in Uruguay. So I do have the pleasure to welcome our three guests. Dr. Alejandro Moreno, coordinator of the Euroclim Euroclima program for UN Environment, Dr. Roberto Ponce, research professor at the Faculty of Economics and Business of University of Desarrollo in Chile, and Monica Gomez, expert of the Ministry of Housing, Spatial Planning and Environment in Uruguay. I would like to share that all questions are going to be answered after the presentation through the chat, and they're going to be translated into Spanish or English, and they will be answered afterwards by the presenter. So if you have any questions, please write your question after the presentation so we can organize and have the time in order to discuss. Let's begin then today's webinar with the introduction of Dr. Alejandro Moreno, the coordinator of the program Euroclima. Alejandro has a PhD in economics and has 15 years of experience managing projects. He works currently for UN Environment, coordinating a European project called Euroclima. The main objective of the program is to create strategies and mitigation and adaptation measures for climate change in policies and development plans. It's an honor for me to give you the floor, Alejandro. Just a minute. Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I would like to thank the BNAC community and the Regatta community program for allowing me some minutes when doing this introduction, and also the rest of speakers and all people present here this morning with us. I would like to briefly present a study related to the topic of today's webinar, organized in the framework of Euroclima program, and that we think that is going to be interested for you. It was developed by a group of consultants with Jose Alberto Lara in chief. I hope he's listening today, in collaboration with the Climate Change UN Environment of the Panama office. It's called Cost-Benefit Analysis for Climate Change in Urban Areas for Latin America. First, I would like to highlight that we chose this topic because it relates to one of the topics of the programs, content of the program, which this indicates that this is quite interesting. It's interesting. People are interested in this because they want a tool to facilitate the decision making when choosing some programs. And the cost-benefit analysis is not new. It's just a technique that has been existing for many years. We didn't use it for creating different in this field. We use it for different other projects, different companies. In this case, it was easy to give a quantitative value, which was to quantify the costs and benefits that we intended to obtain, and it was easy. What we did after was to adapt these techniques to projects where benefits are hard to measure in terms of economic terms or quantitative terms. For example, how to measure the benefit of biodiversity or maintaining of costs. I do believe that this is the challenge that we'll address today: how to generate trustable indicators or the reduction of risk intended to, and how to adapt the measures and analysis, already existing analysis of cost benefit, in order for them to work for this way, in order to prioritize these measures of adaptation. Systems that we use currently were cost benefit analysis, on one hand more numeric, more financing, and we have another analysis, cost effectivity, and another analysis which is more qualitative, which is multi-criteria, that I'm sure they will be explained in different presentations today. Today's reality of what we have seen from UN Environment is that many municipalities, we have those analyses, we have those tools, but they are not used. They're not used because they are too complex, or because we just simply we do not know how to use it. So we just choose, we get criteria, some quantitative, what is not correct. So what we intended with this study, and this is what I'd like to finish with, is to simplify this analysis and present an easy way for them to be used when measuring and when communicating also, which is also an important part. Why we chose one path instead of another. You know that after some time the budget for adaptation they increase, and the decision maker on the one hand is interested to know this analysis so they can make this process easier, and also the communication of those imprecisions is also important. So thank you very much for your attention. Without further ado, I give the floor to Lileva, the moderator, and thank you very much. If you have any questions, or if you are interested in this study, please do contact us and we will give you a copy of the report. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alejandro, for the presentation, the introduction of the advances of your work. As I mentioned before, your questions can be done after the presentations. If you have any, or if you want to ask questions regarding the study mentioned by Alejandro. Now, I do have the pleasure to welcome Dr. Roberto Ponce. He's a teaching professor of the Faculty of Economy and Business, the Economy of University of Development, Desarrollo in Chile. He will present methodologies for the selection of measures of adaptation through this cost-benefit analysis, experiences of Asunción, Paraguay. Roberto has a PhD in economy of climate change. He participated in different studies related to the economic value of goods and services or environmental services for Ministry of Chile and other international organisms. His lines of research include economy of climate change, valuation of ecosystem value, economic management of water resources, environmental finance, and development of mechanisms for environmental economics. So I give the floor to Roberto Ponce. Just a minute. Thank you. Good morning. I hope you are listening to me well. First of all, I would like to thank the community of practice for this opportunity to share with you the results of our research that we carry out. This research that we carry out in Chile. As Lady mentioned, the main objective of this presentation is to commend some results that we have regarding the cost-benefit analysis of a policy of climate change, in a specific case of the value of goods and means services of Paraguay. The idea of the presentation, today's presentation, I don't have to convince you regarding the importance of the economic impact that will have in climate change that we will have in the future. I will talk about adaptation policies, why it is important, and to include, as Alejandro mentioned, why is it important to include economic analysis in the discussion. I will present briefly the methodologies, prioritization methodologies, and I will go more into detail in the cost-benefit analysis, but I would like to explain this further because it has to do with prioritization for climate change. Finally, I will present a case study that we carried out for the Inter-American Bank of Development some time ago regarding a sanitation project that has to do with a adaptation policy, then it could mean some sort of way to adapt. In order to start, we all know that climate change has to do with a series of changes of temperature, precipitations, and other variables, and this, as it is presented in this slide, has an impact on different socioeconomical systems: health, mortality, and morbidity related to climate, increase of mortality regarding heat waves. In agriculture, we will have an impact in these changes in temperature, precipitations on crops, yields, and demand of irrigation. In cost, for example, coastal areas, we had some waves that hit hardly some touristic areas, and that carried out a lot of costs in order to rebuild and efficient the impact that could have in the ocean or patterns of migration of commercial species. As you can see here, the relevance or the importance that we have here in this discussion, because it has to do with the impact on social systems, and then it is translated with a change in the well-being. And we economists, what we do is to evaluate these changes and how they are going to change the wealth of people and companies due to, in this case, climate change that is illustrated here, and some other, because it is a long list. We know that climate change has an impact, but what is society doing in order to adapt, or in order to modify his or her behavior regarding the policies of the new climate reality? So society organized, and they have created a series of policies that deal with these changes. So in this case, with adaptation and mitigation. In this case, since this webinar is regarding webinar adaptation, so I have here the definition of the UN. We have some other different definitions, which is actually adaptation involves actions to anticipate the adverse effects of climate change, either in a preventive way or to minimize damage change, or taking advantage of opportunities that climate change can bring. So an important thing of climate change is that we'll have losers and winners. For example, where before we had some sort of a crop and now we don't have it, let's see, I don't know, wheat, they're going to be damaged, and this area is not going to be able to produce. So there's going to be an impact here that impact from the producers to the consumers. So they're losers and winners. So these policies of adaptation have to minimize the impact and maximize the benefits in a way. Since we know about adaptation policies, what is important, why is it crucial to value? Why is it important? Basically, any policy of adaptation carries out a series of changes, whether economic, that social, for example, related to migration of social groups. Due to this impact, we have cultural changes, meaning that ours is something that we have in our lifestyle, that we have to change, and of course, this all generates a presence of institutions. All these changes generated in these different economic scales, social scales, we have to prioritize, and the best way to do this, to prioritize the action, we have to have a common metric. It could be controversial, but we need to have a metric in order to use correctly money, and the options we need to value and transport and have a criteria of monetization. Of course, we have just one criteria. We can consider all the different criteria. We have, for example, political, social, cultural, and they do have an approach, a point of view. Yes, but for example, if we have a problem with water, this is solved by a market of water. Since this water is dealt with this market in Latin America, many of the countries of Latin America, due to this environment, the correct environment, political, social, and cultural environment, in order to improve this water market. So, for example, the economic aspect is one other aspect that we need to consider. And even when this is an extra criteria, the contribution that has this is that this allows us to compare and to view critically the money, because that we are going to use the money in a better way. We can use the money in order to rehabilitate health services, or spend this money better or more in more intelligent ways, considering different priorities of the different countries. So it is something very important that allow us to compare the reach of different policies. Here, it's a matter of balance. What I have to balance is the impact associated to climate change. How much those impacts are going to cost me? What is the economic value of the positive and negative impacts of this, versus the value or the investment necessary in order to mitigate or adaptate for this impact. So it's some sort of a balance of these policies and the benefit that will generate these policies. As I mentioned before, as it was mentioned before by Alejandro, there are different prioritization methodologies: cost benefit, cost effectiveness, multi-criteria, etc. Just to name a few. As Alejandro mentioned, the cost benefit analysis has a long data of assessment in programs or private projects regarding quantification cost benefits, which is quite simple. A few decades ago, we have been using in Chile the cost-benefit analysis in order to define the social policies through the Inter-American Bank Integrative Project, which is a national system that prioritizes through this methodology, which is the prioritization that we're going to give to this project. And the theoretical basis, simple. It's simple. The benefits of a political issue is increase in welfare, while costs result in a decrease in the well-being of society. Therefore, in the means the benefit exceed the cost, this benefit is going to be good or desirable for society. However, this sort of theory, utopia presented by the theory, it has a lot of challenges when translating this into a more public policy. As it was mentioned by Alejandro, when we talk about a private project, cost benefits are quite easy to identify, but when we and the final beneficiary is identified, which is the environment, the investment. But when we talk about a policy regarding climate, what is the group that we're going to consider in order to add a benefit? If we had talked about a adaptation policy for a region, for a national, for a country, if it's mitigation, is it going to be global? Are we going to consider age groups? Are we going to have gender consideration? Are we going to have another consideration? So as you can imagine, once we define the cost of the opportunity of this impact of climate change, which is the easy part, when we start adding benefits, it's going to have an impact on the final output. For example, I can go from multiplying of a population of a small location area, or multiply this for a whole country, for example Chile, and I'm going to stress in a way the benefits. So we have to be very careful with what we need to add. I'm going to add the benefits of this policy. Another fundamental aspect is to determine the relevant time period for evolution. The climate policies are characterized by incurring in short-term costs. We need which allow to enjoy benefits in the long term. For example, if I do an assessment of short term, we're going to give greater cost relevance. However, if I develop a long-term evaluation, I give a more importance to a greater relevance of benefits. So which is the point? Independently of that we are able or not to generate the cost benefit related to environmental policy, there are the ethical decisions that we need to take, the ones that we develop this type of analysis in order to have a assessment that is more the better way. I do not have the solution. Literature does not recognize a solution as to which is the relevant period. We don't have a manual that says you do this A project, you do this and you do that. No, it's just that sometimes it's necessary the criteria of the researcher, of the person of the decision maker, on the basis of written recommendation, but the finalization is made by the person doing the analysis. And a minor aspect has to do with the rate. For example, if I consider a climatic change for the long term, the way I discount these benefits, it's relevant since it could generate a change in this benefit. We can name two. There are two types of discount: exponential and a parabolic discount, and that has to do with how I do value the future generation. In exponential, I assign a little value, and in parabolic, I assign increase the relative weight of benefits received by the long term, let's say 50, 100 years. In any case, the truth of the rate is not new. It has to do with the Stern report. I don't remember the year, but the Stern report says that all the discussions regarding this report is to minimize the impacts of climate change. It has to do not with the values used, but has to do with the ethical considerations used by a discount rate, which is not less. As an example, just to illustrate, we just finished a study that values preservation projects in maritime areas in Chile. For example, if we use an exponential discount, that project of preservation of biodiversity has a relevant period of 10 years, and the actual value per person is $10. However, if I use a parabolic discount, the relevant period is 300 years, because we're talking about goods and services, environmental goods and services for support, not provision, so it's long term, and the value of this person to pay its sub-value in 50%, for example, regarding the parabolic discount. So the choose of the rate is a technical aspect of the cost-benefit analysis. It has to do at the end of the day implicances or impacts in society or not. What I want to present next is the result of a study that I mentioned that we carry out with Inter-American Development Bank. That has to do with comprehensive sanitation program for the Bay of Asunción and the urban stream. The objective of this consultancy was to determine the economic value of the change welfare associated with the improvement of ecosystem services. So basically, Asunción in Paraguay is a system of treatment, of water treatment system, so it was not accomplishing the purification of all water needed by the person, and this, with the change in precipitations, that it was going to impact the system, the purification way of the water by the system. So we had to evaluate how to deal with this. We were requested to evaluate the adaptation policy in order to help the ecosystem to process this, and that resulted in a sanitation policy. So that is basically the project. In order to purify the water of the community, we had different projects. We could have a sanitation project in Lake Ipacari, or a sanitation project in Bahia Asunción, or sanitation project in both places. So those were the three options that we faced, and those were the three options that we had to do, apply the cost-benefit analysis. This, I hope you can see this well, generate different impacts in quality of water, whether in the bay or in the lake. It goes from a bad quality, meaning that we were not able to carry out in the lake different activities we didn't have, so it generated a greenish water and with bad smell. We have bad quality, and then regular, good, and finally a very good quality. And basically is the opposite, where we have a different type of water, very good water, the beaches occupied for use for fun activities. It was open as and we had biodiversity in the very good way. So we have to evaluate if the Paraguay Asunción community evaluated in the cost-benefit and the different options of sanitation, and if they were positive or negative. Here we have to define the beneficiaries associated to this policy. We have direct and indirect. The direct ones are the ones using the ecosystem, the bay, the lake for recreation. We have economic activities important. San Bernardino, the community, San Bernardino community is near this and is associated with the quality of the lake, and the communities could enjoy, could profit from with a better health. We had also indirect beneficiaries, since the lake is a cultural icon of Paraguay and goes further the fact of using the lake for this activity. So Paraguayan community assigns a value for existing the lake, and we have other different causes for ethical benefits. And we had the costs, which is actually the easy part. Basically, supermarket list where I calculate the cost of the constructions of different systems of sanitation systems. For example, on the one hand I have benefits, direct and indirect, with a value that is not clear, and on the other hand we have costs, which is quite clear. So the relevant question here was, how are we going to approach those benefits that are not trivial to calculate? How are we going to approach this? So after looking at a lot of information to build to create a methodology in order to assess this, well, we were not able to do this, and we looked for information to the WHO to look for the impact of bad water on society in order to effects of health. We use the benefits also in order to calculate the value associated to recreation of these natural areas. We use a method called choice experiment that we look for to determine economic value of a resource, but not total, but different. We were able to identify the different components of this good. And finally, the impact of tourism. San Bernardino community of the San Bernardino, we did these two changes in productivity method. How is it going to change the flow of tourists to this area once the area is sanitized or not? I will give you two cases. One, the bay and the lake are in a regular state meaning that they are not as clean as they could, the activities cannot be done during the whole year, and that the wealth of the biodiversity is not the best. And then we calculate the benefits. For 2014, the benefits in health is $7.6 per year, and the recreation is in landscape 85.3, and tourism I don't have extra benefit. Because why? Because we assumed that it was continuation of the current situation. We had the cost of investment, Paraguay Lake, we have 75 million investment a year and $1 million per operation a year. So that is the project number one, the situation number one, where we apply this cost-benefit analysis. So, and then we had the opposite situation where the lake and the bay had a very good quality water. In this case, the benefits of health is the same. However, the benefits for recreation, landscape, and the biodiversity increased. And we have benefits of tourism of $310,000 per year. However, this increase in benefits, the cost increased proportionally even more due to the technological options are more expensive, so the total is $207 million, and operational cost is $4.14 million per year. And at this point, I will tell you one thing. The main objective of the analysis was to calculate the benefits associated to the demand, meaning the benefits of the sanitation policy, and not to the costs. Therefore, if you ask me, I can justify very good the benefits part, but not the costs, since the costs are estimated. Why? Because when we did the program at the time, the engineering plans were preliminary. We didn't have final information. However, with these numbers, we were able to carry out experiment of a cost-benefit analysis, where I have to my right, I have the very good situation, and then the regular situation, where the blue bar is net value, the current value, VNA, the red is VPB, and the green is the costs. As you can say, the cost-benefit analysis indicates that the society of Asunción as a whole is going to be better with a project that takes the quality of water from the current situation to the regular situation, to a project or situation where we take the quality of water current to a very good quality. And that, why is that? Because accessing an ecosystem with a really good quality has economic cost for the families that maybe in this currently are not able to cost, considering the per capita income. So this cost-benefit analysis we carried out over 30 years and a fixed rate of 12%. So the first thing, that we have a cost opportunity in order to access to better policies, adaptation policies. In order to, for the case of Paraguay, we have a cost of opportunity in order to access better adaptation policies, and people know that, but so we have to choose whether the regular solution or the very good solutions, considering that we have a degree of substitution of private and public measures. In order to conclude some final thoughts, the use of cost-benefit analysis, we have this, if this is completely justified, but the use is going to, of the utility was going to, in function of, on the level of information available, all costs and all benefits. In the technical aspects, normally we talk about engineering costs. However, the benefits related to ecosystems, we cannot quantify this. So there is a limit that has to do, that it doesn't have to do with the method, with the technical capacity of the teams in order to develop this type of analysis. Regarding the technical aspects, it is quite important to determine the criteria that we're going to use in order to define the discount rate. As I mentioned, the maritime reserve, the discount rate is fundamental in order to determine, to say that is benefit if a project is good or not for the society. Sadly, in Asunción, we were not able to calculate, or we didn't carry out the cost-benefit analysis with the different options available, or the interest or time period, but due to the time we didn't consider it. And finally, other considerations, that is the cost-benefit analysis that, as I mentioned, we cannot base a decision based on this analysis. It's just one more tool that would allow us to quantify the benefits and the cost, assuming that we have access to that information, but it's fundamental for us to include in our criteria social, cultural, and institutional aspects. And in this case, there are different methods in literature. We have the Marty criteria and other methods more related to for a risk analysis of the robust analysis methods that normally includes this information into a greater set of decision-making criteria. So the decision maker is going to carry out a decision, to make a decision in the most informed way. That is all I had for you today. Thank you very much, and I give the floor to Lily in order to continue with the webinar. Thank you very much, Roberto, for this information regarding methodologies of evaluation of options to adaptation, with all advantages in order to use and get information in order to make the correct decision for climate change. But also we need to consider the other challenges and how can we include them. Thank you very much for the presentation and the application of the methodology, the practical methodology. And with this, I would like to give the floor to Monica Gomez so she can talk about the case of Uruguay. Monica is an expert of the Ministry of Housing, Territorial Ordering in Uruguay, and Environment in Uruguay. She will present policy on climate change adaptation. For the case of Uruguay, she is experienced in adaptation and climate change in coastal zones and elaboration of strategies for generation of national adaptation plan for climate change, especially in coastal zones in Uruguay. So it is a pleasure for me to give the floor to Monica. Good morning, everybody. I would like to thank the community of practice for the invitation and Regata and the opportunity to present these examples in my country. First, I want to present the context of Uruguay. It's located in the south part. We are a small community of more than 3 million inhabitants, but in that we suffer from natural risk quite intensive, especially in the last 15 years, which are associated normally to droughts, floods, cold and heat waves. And the main thing is that we have phenomena developed at the micro scale. And the causes associated to these events are related generally with periods of El Niño and La Niña. And there was a huge impact from the economic perspective for our country. Also, another important aspect in Uruguay are the floods. We are at the end of this great Latin American basin, and due to the El Niño we could have floods and droughts periods that are quite important and that affect the society. And the following, for example, the 3 months of this phenomena we change that affect other changes that affect other situations. In this sense, our country generates different policies and strategies related to climate change. From 1994, we started the working group with this unit in the Ministry of Environment to this year, 15 years ago, where we approved the national policy on climate change. So it is, in the last 15 years, it has been quite intense in the talk on these topics in Uruguay. And we generated this national response system to climate change that is directed or chaired by my ministry, and is also integrated by all the 7 ministries and services and systems and the Office of Planning and Budget of the Presidency. Also, we have an integration with the regional governments through different representatives. So it's in this framework we develop the different policies and plans in our country. The type of response that we adopted as a country have to do with the production costs, population centers, and technology. The first thing was I will talk about the agriculture and livestock aspect, and then the costs, and then I will give you a advance of what we're working as a city in Uruguay. Our country slide had an impact on suffer from an impact in different areas. For example, we have this coastal zone, which is a quite important zone, where because that is where we witness tourism. This is the main increase of the main access to the GPA, and also the areas that have to do with farming and agricultural livestock. The problem that we have mainly in Uruguay, even when we are a small country, we have different simultaneous different macro, meso and micro scale programs. We have in this part of the continent where we have events that are controlled through a superior scale. So the main aspect here was to try to work jointly with the generation of policies and planning in order to continue that the vulnerability of the topic and the sector of the area that we're working on is going to be a condition to the spatial scale and temporal scale. In this sense, at the national scale, where we develop is the agricultural livestock policy, describing the different measures of adaptation for the variability as to climate change. And we normally work with these two horizons, variability and change. We took measures, national and regional and local measures, and we considered different spatial units, the type, and we develop in the design of resiliency strategies for each of these measures. For example, at the local level, one measure at the local, which are the forage banks, we're organized through organizations, local organizations, micro property locations that work directly with the rural family, where we create barriers, we evaluate impact, and we list the different challenges for policy instruments that could eliminate the barriers identified. At the regional level, especially in the south of the country, around the capital, we have the Metropolitan Climate Change Plan that has to do with 3 coastal departments, which developed a strategy of implication of vulnerability. And up to date, we have 3 departments of coastal departments, and they have a list of projects with the type, the management, and the value for implementing these projects. And then at the local scale, always in the coastal zone, the main problem that we face in the country was the damaging of infrastructure, whether urban or route, facing flooding or heavy storms. In La República University, had to identify the different vulnerable areas and carry out adaptation measures analysis for climate change, centered in those areas considered with the most vulnerable and in coordination with all ministries that has to do with this, including local governments. In that sense, up to date, we have identified quite localized project presented in infrastructure with a management plan and the adaptation measures that are considered viable in each scenario. For example, this is a scenario of a coast of Uruguay, a touristic coast of Uruguay, where we were able to value what could be the cost for non-action, for the rock fill, and the new technologies, which are the geotubes, in order for the decision maker. And then in each of the coastal departments, what we did up to date was to generate different scenarios and protocols in order to take adaptation measures. So each department listed the most important problems or most urgent problem. In this case, the Rocha department, the most touristic one of the country. We have a coastal lake where the aperture and closing had to do with an impact of the biodiversity of the zone, the economic impact, and also the flooding next to the lake, and that affected the populations and the tourism. Another department, Maldonado, in Punta del Este, also the challenges are greater here, and what we try to work here is the structures. But one of the main important things that we tried to work on was to generate a climate change unit that will implement these changes or address these issues in a more comprehensive way. In Canelones, the second department with greater population, we were able to implement adaptation measures in different municipalities, coastal municipalities, especially working with reconstruction measures centered in ecosystems. In other departments, San Jose, we generated a climate change cabinet, and we have sites of erosive intervention. We had defenses of vulnerable structures, and we were able to obtain a financial assessment of coastal adaptation on those sites. As for Colonia, where we have coastal erosion problems, we worked with resilient coastal forests and a synergy with hard and soft work. So in this case, what I wanted to show you is that the country had to implement immediate adaptation measures through the local governments and regional governments, and at the country central level, what we're working on is to access funding in order to manage the different problems identified in the vulnerabilities identified in different parts of the coast. In the agricultural livestock area, it's a project that we have here. In the coastal zone, we have different sources of financing. Arau Clima, we have TNA, we are working with them. Each project has to do with a different topic that I showed you, and we are accessing funds from the Green Climate Fund. We hope that for 2019 the adaptation plan will be centered in these 3 points, since we have considering that we have the coastal agricultural livestock plan finished. So in the next 15 years we will have a national policy of climate change that will have implemented at least 3 plans of adaptation in these sectors aforementioned. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Monica. Thank you for your presentation on the experience of Uruguay and promoting the synergy on different adaptation plans with a approach of ecosystem, and how it was this process of analyzing and prioritization this, especially for this plan of adaptation in the coastal area. Thank you very much. Now we have a question and answer session where I would like to ask all participants if you could please write your name on the chat and your questions for the speakers, Roberto and Monica. Sadly, I see Alejandro had some problems. He was connected from Europe, and sadly he's not available now in order to answer the questions. But if you have some specific questions for Alejandro, you can just write to us and we will give the questions to him, and we will have him to make him answer the questions. So I give you some minutes for you to write your questions. Please write also who are you asking the question to. Colombia. It is a question for Roberto. And the question says, in order to assess the economical the benefits of tourism, we use the travel cost. Why in this research we didn't do it? In the change of productivity, we use it for benefits that could be included in a production. And so I give the floor to Roberto for him to answer these questions, while we are gathering the other questions. Yes, you're totally right. We could have used the cost of travel or using a value survey. We did not use it because most of the people that go to these recreation areas come from Asunción. So therefore the distance of the cost was going to be more or less the same, so the variability was going to be the same, and we needed to, in order to carry out the calculation, we need to, for that cost to change dramatically. That's why we use the choice experiment in order to determine other things. And in the change of productivity, we went for the producers of the San Bernardino. So that is why we went to the tourism economic activity, but the recreation benefits were calculated not with costs of travel, but we calculated them with the mixed choice experiment. That's why. Thank you very much for your question. Thank you, Roberto, for your answer. Cecilia Jones asked another question. How can we constitute the agreements on the cost-benefit analysis related to environments? I give you the floor. As I mentioned during my presentation, the most complex aspect of carrying out this type of analysis has to do with adaptation policies that had costs in the short term, medium term, and long term. And it has to do with a series of decisions that are not technical but political decisions, where we need to agree as a society which is going to be the criteria that we're going to use, or to add the benefits of the criteria, to consider the time, and the criteria to define the transference, and among other aspects that is going to determine this reason of cost-benefit analysis. Because what we do not want to happen is, as a society, we lie to each other and say, well, I do consider this project 500 years, the cost-benefit is going to be positive, but the opportunity cost of invest this could be quite high depending on the level of development of the country. So we need to agree as a society as to what is reasonable considering our income preferences, etc., in order to determine the parameters that finally will indicate if the project is the correct cost-benefit or not. It's not a technical decision, it's a political decision. Thank you. Sorry for this minute of silence. We had a small problem with technology here. Thank you very much, Roberto, for your answer. Now we have a question for Monica from Stephanie. The question says, in the ecosystems in the lake of Rocha, do we currently have fishing activity? Was that affected, or is it going to be affected by climate change? What are the strategies of adaptation of climate change have you evaluated? Thank you very much. I give the floor to Monica. Thank you very much for your question. Yes, we do have fishing activity in the Rocha Lake. We have shrimp fishing and other fishing resources which are quite important. It's a community of small fishermen, community with whom we elaborated the protocol, because they are the main impact. They suffer from the main impact of this, and the bar of the lake is broken. If the bar of the lake is broken and we do not have a type of water or a heavy storm that could affect this, so the University of La República, in coordination with the municipality of La Paloma and the administration of Rocha Lake, they all belongs to the protective area. They coordinate activities, they carry out studies, and we work with communities of small fishermen, with people living there in the Rocha department, with the national entity, with the local institution, and we organized and we created a protocol that considered especially geology and the natural aspect of the lake, and that had to do to mechanically open the bar, which was the best way for not to generate a ecosystem, the less ecosystem impact from the ecosystem point of view. So this open system for the bar was carried out at a random way. People define the most precise moment, and currently, yes, it is a decision maker where we have a protocol that is coordinated with the intercept. For opening the bar, one of the criteria of subvention, multi-criteria, is that we need to consider the biological process of the fishing resources in the zone. This is one of the criteria that we used in order to define whether to open or not this. That is my question, my answer. Thank you very much for answering. One more question for you from Whitman Machado. In your adaptation measures identified in the plan, which could be the criteria to prioritize and implement the cost-benefit study? And then we have a question for clarification for Roberto. So Monica, you have the floor. Thank you for the question. Well, I'm not an economist. I belong to the ecosystem area. I believe that it's a great tool to assign a cost to the non-action of adaptation, which is what would mean if we do not adapt. What would happen? We in Uruguay, in the coastal zone, we know this. The cost of no adaptation is arriving at an inflection point where that is going to cause a quite important impact at the coastal region for the 6 coastal departments of the region. Therefore, an application of a cost-benefit analysis has to, according to me, would need to be applied at the beginning of planification, meaning that what we have are vulnerabilities, and we are working on that, and we are zonifying the different requirements of vulnerability. We have water vulnerabilities, but also social, economic vulnerabilities. Since one of the tourism is one of the main access to income for one of the departments, so what we need is to assign a cost for non-action, meaning not adapt, a cost for different measures that we could select or that we would want to adapt, and the fact of having a cost benefit is to organize different actions of implementation, different activities. If the improvement of infrastructures is quite elevated, as I mentioned before, we could center this in ecosystems to manage ecosystems. Therefore, we can coordinate and make synergy, and whether you carry out palliative measures of low cost or implement greater cost alternatives or combine them both. I think that is what we are using at the international level. And the most amazing thing of this activity is that one of the departments in Colonia, the fact of carry out activities of low cost, carry out to the same tendency to invest funds, municipal funds, for hard infrastructures that were not helping to prevent erosion in the coastal zone. Just it was a coordination of the transportation area, engineering with the environment area that were not coordinated because they didn't see the effects. Since they implemented, they got in contact, since they knew that the cost was not that elevated and that the machinery was available, we could rebuild the lake. So this cost-benefit analysis at the beginning of the planification is fundamental. It is essential. Thank you. Thank you very much, Monica, for responding to the questions. We finished this webinar then, unless there are other questions. So with this, I finish saying that we will share the slides and the recording of the webinar, as well as the contact information of 3 speakers for you to contact them in case you need to, and to ask them any questions that was not answered. So with this, thank you very much for your participation and the speakers from the community of practice for the adaptation plans to climate change in Latin America and the Caribbean. From your new UN Environment and Regatta, it was a pleasure for us to share these experiences with you. And you're very welcome to contact us, as well as we will share some other materials. And please feel free to send the other information that you consider important and interesting and of value in order to develop a rich library, in order to have this all support for the complexity of evaluation of options of measures of adaptation. Thank you very much.